there, it's Carrie Rhodes here. Welcome back to my YouTube channel and another card making video. In today's video, I am showing you 5 ways to use the Slimline brick cover die from Scrappy Tales. I love Slimline cards and I thought this die was so much fun and I had a lot of ideas for techniques with it. Here you can see the die and all the fun little bricks that die cut out of a piece of paper like this. So you're going to have a lot of fallout pieces when you die cut out this pattern. So I thought for technique number 1, I would do an inlay technique, and I'm going to use a gel press print. I love to make gel press prints. If you're not familiar with gel press printing, I will put a link to my gel press videos in the top corner for you so you can check those out. So I die cut this again from a piece of gel press print that I showed you there, a gray piece, and I'm going to keep all those fallout pieces and set this piece aside, and then I will use the original piece that I die cut from a very light gray cardstock, and I'm going to glue that down to a 8.5 by 3.5 inch white cardstock panel. So here is the first way I'm showing you how to adhere this. Now, tedious tasks like this make me crazy. I do not enjoy it at all. It makes me very antsy, so I had to come up with a different way to glue this intricate die down, and I'll show you what that is in just a minute. So I'm gluing that down to this white cardstock, and then I can take those fallout pieces from my gel press print and I can do an inlay technique with my bricks. Now you could fill in this whole entire panel. That would look super duper cool. But I wanted to have more of a random pattern that kind of zigzagged down the card. So that's what I'm going to do. But you could do a lot of different patterns with this inlay technique, and you could use cardstock in different colors. You could use patterned paper for this. You could use an ink blended background for this. So there are lots of different ways to create an inlay look with this die. So I'm going to finish that going all the way down to the bottom, and you can see how it just sort of zigzags back and forth. And I tried to pick out the really interesting pieces that weren't just gray, so I had a lot of visual interest and texture on it like gel press prints do, because gel press prints are made with acrylic paint on a plate, and you pick up that print off of the plate with a piece of cardstock. It's so much fun. I will be doing a video on it very soon, but again, I do have a technique playlist for the gel press you can check out. So technique number 2 is overlay. So we just did inlay. Now we're going to overlay this piece of cardstock that's that light gray color over the top of the gel press print. And you can see I have a little puddle of glue there that I'm brushing on the back of my intricate die with a foam brush. And that was the way to do it. So there is going to be a little bit of glue like when you press it down. I just lay down a paper towel, it absorbs the glue, and voila. You've got it. It's quick and easy to glue this down. Okay, so now I still have this piece left over where I die cut out those bricks. I'm going to go ahead and use that. So this isn't quite another technique, but it's just me being resourceful and using up what I have to create a background. So once I get that all covered in glue, I just use a scrap piece of paper here, but you'll see as I progress through my backgrounds, I end up using a paper towel behind it as well as to press it down, and it works the best. I have a huge pile of leftover paper towels that I'm repurposing from a painting project I did with my mom and my mother-in-law and my sister on Mother's Day. All right, technique number 3 is to make the die cut into a stencil. So I'm going to stencil over the top of another section of this same gel press background, and I'm going to use some modeling paste. So I'm just taping this into place as a stencil. And again, I could fill this all the way in, or I can do kind of a scattered look where it's not completely filled in, it's more random, and rustic looking. I love that look. So there it is, and then I just peel off this homemade stencil, and you could die cut this from something a little bit more sturdy if you wanted to reuse it, like a window sheet maybe, if you have window sheet that cuts really well, but I just use cardstock for mine. So I'm going to set that aside to dry, and we'll move on to technique number 4, which is emboss with your plate. So Spellbinders has a silicone mat, so you can see my plate is face up and my paper is taped down to it. Then I'm going to put down the silicone mat and the embossing plate. Both of these things come from Spellbinders with your platinum machine, whether it's this size, which is the 8.5 by 11 size, or the smaller size. They both come with this silicone mat. And once I do that, it's not going to cut into the paper, it's going to press into the paper. So you have this dry embossed brick background. All right, let's set that aside and move on to technique number 5, which is to ink it up. I love making my own inky backgrounds. So this is kind of going to start out looking like I'm making a galaxy background, but I am just wanting a mix of color here and there, and I thought that old paint would be fun in there, and then I used some hickory smoke and black soot distress oxide inks. Of course I'm going to splatter that because splatter is my jam. I love it. I'm going to pick that up with a paper towel, and then I'm going to splatter on some Salty Ocean. I just wanted a little bit of blue in there, kind of like on my gel press print. I also brought in the orange, but it didn't really show up, so I didn't put too much of that on there. So I have the blue, and that's just distress ink. But once it was all said and done, I was like, it needs more because that blue dried back so light. So I brought in some black soot in that distress oxide because that's what I had out, and splattered that a lot more. Because I'm going to die cut this, the splatter's going to get lost quite a bit. So it's okay to like go overboard on the splatter. I really think it's okay to go overboard on splatter anytime. So I die cut that once it was dry, and I wanted to show you here how to use this tool-in-one from Spellbinders to really help you release those bricks. It's super easy to do with this brush end. All right, so now I'm going to take that same glue method. You can see here, I put the paper towel down, and that was really much easier than a scrap piece of paper, and just paint on the glue to the back of this, and it worked amazing. And no more tedious task to make Carrie crazy. So I'll glue that background down, that brick panel down. That is the one I die cut from the ink blending. Like that. Now a lot of these I will have to trim down the background because I got a little wonky when I glued it down, but that's okay. So next I'm bringing back that homemade stencil that I used for the modeling paste, but this time I'm going to use it to ink blend because this is probably the coolest look with this as a stencil. I don't know, modeling paste is pretty cool, right? I like how this turned out. So I'm using it as a stencil, but I'm doing ink blending. I'm using those same exact 3 colors that I just used and am putting them on randomly. That's kind of my thing today, putting things down in a random way. So this is the hickory smoke I'm putting down first, and then I'm going to bring back my black soot distress tool, but I'm not going to add any more ink to it. I'm just going to kind of clean it off on there. And same with the paint, worn paint. And then I have a very subtle background here, but it has that effect of the bricks, and I really think this turned out cool. Isn't that fun? I also brushed off a little bit of the modeling paste, so I'll just sweep that aside, and there's that last background. So here you can see both of the ink it up backgrounds, and then I had that stencil piece left over, and I was like, why not go ahead and use this as a background? It has ink on it, and it has a little bit of modeling paste on it, so it has texture, it has color, and I glued it onto a white piece of paper for another background. So I showed you 5 techniques, but all in all I ended up with way more than 5 backgrounds just by using those extra pieces. So here I'm going to lay them all out for you so you can see them each or all together, and in total I made 8 backgrounds. And now I'm going to pick out some of these to create cards with. And on my cards, I am putting the Oops a Daisy stamp set from Scrappy Tales. I love this set so much. It's got these beautiful daisies and there's 5 little bees. I accidentally forgot to stamp the 5th little bee, but I stamped 4 panels. And this is the image from Google that's inspired my coloring for today. So I have these all colored out and ready to go because the technique was really the highlight of today's video. But if you would like to see me color out these flowers, I did them white for my previous video that I used the stamp set on, and I will link that right here in the top corner so you can check that out and come back to finish watching this video. So then it was time to die cut these out. There is a die that cuts out every single flower and every single bee in this stamp set. And here's where I realized I forgot to stamp out that 5th little bee, and he's my favorite. So I went ahead and stamped him on each of the papers, colored him, and die cut him out. And look at all of these amazing die cuts. I love them. So now I'm going to lay out my pieces on my first card, which is that inlay pattern. And I wanted a flower in each of the 4 colors. And then I'm going to throw some bees in there as well, because I want these cards to say Happy Bee Day, which is one of the sentiments in this stamp set. Now, all 4 of my cards are going to have the same exact layout and sentiment. I wanted to kind of build up my stash of birthday cards, and I thought these were just really beautiful. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat this same exact layout on my 4 different backgrounds, but I'll show you how they all come together. So this first card, I decided I would go ahead and glue down the flowers right onto the background and then pop up the bees with some foam squares. Then all I had to do was trim off the excess stems and leaves that hung off the edge. And I realized one of my bees I didn't actually stick down. So I peeled off the back and stuck him down. And there's my very first card front. So we're going to set that aside and then move on to the second background, which is the one I used the die as a stencil and used modeling paste. So I laid those out kind of where I wanted them. And now this time I decided I think I would like the flowers better if they were actually popped up with foam squares. So that's what I'm going to do for the rest of the cards, is pop up the flowers and the bees with foam squares. So I'm going to add glue to the back of these foam squares just because it's going over that modeling paste and I needed a little extra something to stick them down. So there is card front number 2. For the 4th one, I am using the embossed panel. This one's so crisp and clean. And by the way, I also used that light gray cardstock to do this embossing technique. If you use regular lightweight cardstock, sometimes you can cut through it a little bit, even with that embossing mat. So a colored cardstock works good, heavyweight cardstock works good, and watercolor cardstock works good for that technique. So I've got all the things popped up for my card front number 3. And then number 4, I decided to use this one that I did the ink it up technique with the stencil. I kind of combined 2 techniques there. And then I'm going to add those bees on as well. So there's all 4 of the card fronts, and now it's time to add a sentiment. Like I said, I'm doing Happy Bee Day. I picked out some pink cardstock that coordinates and die cut those out with a banner die, and I'm gluing all 4 of them in the top right corners. So same exact layout. It makes making multiple cards really easy when you do that. So there you can see all the card fronts, and then all I need to do is add these to a card base, which measures 8.5 by 7 and is scored at 3.5. Now, some of these I had to trim down because I didn't glue the background on straight. So like this one, I'm going to have to trim down my card because I trimmed a little bit off of my card front when I trimmed it down. So each of those getting glued on to a card base, and once they're all glued together, I had a bunch of leftover bees. So I thought I would add 2 to the inside of each card because I had enough to do that, and then it would have something fun on the inside to go with the Happy Bee Day sentiment. So there's all 4 of the cards. I hope that you enjoyed learning some different techniques that you could do with this die, and really probably most cover plate dies you could do this with as well, these techniques. So there are my 4 beautiful cards. I have the Scrappy Tail shopped link for you below, as well as the supplies I use, so you can check those out. They are affiliate links where available, which means I get a small commission back from the shop for using their products and sharing them with you, and I share things that I love because I think you might love them too. So thanks for watching. Thanks for your support. I will see you all again on the next video. If you're new here, feel free to subscribe. I have new videos all the time. Happy stamping. Bye.